Get the cash flow you need with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Pay expenses, make upgrades, perform maintenance, and more with interest-free and low-interest financing. Visit ccga.ca. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advance Payments Program.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. And welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Thursday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Special treat today. We did the Farmer Rapid Fire yesterday. Today, on this Thursday, we are in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and we're down at Prairie Land Park, and we're at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. And today's show is brought to you by Canada Beef. So big shout out to Canada Beef for being the show sponsor today. Canada Beef provides domestic and international market development and promotion services to the Canadian beef industry to increase demand for Canadian beef while ensuring maximum value for producer dollars. And you can find out more about Canada Beef by going to canadabeef.ca. And we're going to find out a lot more about Canada Beef here today on the program. We're going to do a product spotlight. We're going to find out more about Canada Beef with the president of Canada Beef, Eric Bienvenue. And then we're going to be also joined in a panel discussion by Nathan Phinney, who is also the president of the Canadian Cattle Association. If you have any feedback on today's program, I'd love to hear from you. All you have to do is send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms, too many to mention at this point, or you can call the Real Ag feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. Before we get to our guests, I want to mention, I love a good cattle meeting. Like, it's one of the, whenever I get a chance to talk to ranchers and people in the purebred industry, cattle feeders, I really feel like this is my people. I grew up in the cattle industry. We had a feed yard, a small yard, especially at today's standards. My dad and I, we fed cattle up until 2002. My dad spent his entire life in the cattle industry. He, up until this past January when he retired, he was the executive director of the Picture Butte Feeder Co-op. From its inception in the early 90s. It still runs today. It's the largest feeder co-op in the country. Now I feel fortunate enough to be able to talk about the cattle industry on a daily basis, and it truly is an honor and a treat as a member of the media. And one of the things that our audience has been saying a lot of lately, and I hear this from ranchers, from cattle feeders, and even primary crop producers, speaking about some of the economic climate right now around the cattle industry, what I hear a lot is the comment, it's about time. It's been a long time coming. We need to have a healthy cattle industry in our country. Clearly, the consumer has shown they love eating beef. And who the heck wouldn't want to, watching some of that opening video, slicing those steaks open. But also, it's not just about steaks and prime rib and short rib like you had last night here at the banquet. It's also about incorporating beef as a protein source into things like pasta as an accompaniment to some of the main course. There's a lot of ways to consume beef, and the consumer has really shown that they love it. They love the taste of it, never mind some of the great nutritional value and benefits of eating beef, as you all know here. And I'm sure this room, if you think about the consumer or consuming beef from that perspective, we're probably eating more pounds per capita than most other Canadians, but we're leading the charge for sure. So on behalf of everybody at Real Agriculture, I want to say, you know what? love the cattle industry, and it's great to be here at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. Thank you so much for having us, and we're going to get into the show, okay? So we got Eric Bienvenue. He is the president of Canada Beef. He'll be joining me when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
At Vaterstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vaterstad, we look forward to growing together.
Now time for a product spotlight. We're joined by Bryce Geisel, Canada Senior Agronomist with Koch Agronomic Services. What should farmers keep in mind about protecting their nitrogen this fall?
Fall-applied nitrogen is still at risk for losses by volatilization, denitrification, and leaching before and after winter sets in. So utilizing a proper inhibitor with a high rate of active ingredient can help keep that nitrogen around until spring. With a fall nitrogen application, we need to protect it not only until the soil freezes, but try to prevent losses after the snow melts in the spring as well.
So how do the products that Koch Agronomic Services measure up in active ingredients?
So Super U is the standard for dual inhibitors and has been proven over and over again by researchers. For any of those farms out there that may be using fall anhydrous ammonia, Centuro contains a new nitrification inhibitor that allows that application start before the soil cools enough to stop those microbes responsible for the nitrification of ammonia. And Anvil is a proven product to help reduce volatilization losses for farmers using operational efficiency of broadcast urea this fall. You can learn more about the products and find comparisons at defendyourend.ca.
We got a rowdy bunch here today on this Thursday here on RealAg Radio. We're at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. Today's show is brought to you by Canada Beef. Make sure you check out canadabeef.ca. Some great marketing and promotion that Canada Beef is doing. The new campaign, pick the beef with the leaf. I like that.
Do you?
Very much so.
It's very catchy.
Very catchy. I like it. I like taglines that rhyme. And I did a bit of a focus group where I tested it with my family on the weekend when I was prepping for today's show, and my sister jumped out of her chair and says, I like that. How long have they been doing that? I'm like, I think it's new, and it's about 6 months old. So pick the beef with the leaf. As I mentioned, today's show is brought to you by Canada Beef, and we are joined right now by the president of Canada Beef. It is Eric Bienvenue. Eric, great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome to the beef industry. Eric, give us some of your background and introduce yourself to the audience here in Saskatoon, as well as everybody that's outside of the room listening to the show.
Well, some people would say that I'm from the dark side. I spent 21 years in the pork industry and 6 years in the poultry side. So now I'm in the beef. I'm going to have the 3 biggest protein under my belt. It's been incredible over the past 9 months. I've taken on the role of president, as you mentioned, Shaun, in April. I guess the learning curve has been quite exponential. I've learned a lot thanks to all our stakeholders. When I look at Mr. Tyler Fulton, spent some time at his farm. Tom Tycrobe in Manitoba did calving and branding. That was quite an experience for me. And I had the privilege of eating it is called the prairie oyster.
Yum.
That was delicious. Ooh.
Yum.
So anyhow, thanks.
How did you go home and explain that one to your wife?
I didn't. I don't want Shannon to have maybe a different perspective of what I like in different protein aspect. But anyhow, I want to thank as well Nathan. I spent some time at his farm. Our ranchers and producers in Saskatchewan, Crystal and Chad Ross. I did some work at their ranch, and in Alberta as well, in Ontario. So it's been awesome. And so far, so good. You talked about the pick the beef with the leaf. It's been quite a success, actually.
Yeah.
We launched that especially on Food Day Canada, and we had a reach close to 3 million, and it's just growing. So, yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, you said you came from the dark side. I thought you were going to say you came from like insect protein or something like that. You know, poultry and pork, they're not, it's not exactly the dark side. But I'm interested. How does that experience in some of the other protein categories? How does that experience benefit your role now here at Canada Beef?
Essentially, Shaun, it's very much the same, right? It's a protein. On the pork side, very much commodity, and we had to, I guess we were shipping in 67 countries, so we had to understand consumer perception, consumer trends, consumer wants and needs, and that experience I'm bringing to Canada Beef. And on the poultry side, very much domestic with the supply management aspect. So again, I'm bringing that expertise to Canada Beef and promoting our great protein.
This may seem like kind of a silly question and an elementary one, but I think there's the answer is a benefit to a lot of people in and outside of the Canadian beef industry. When we look at the role of Canada Beef, what is Canada Beef there to do? Like, there's obviously there's a lot of people resources. We see the promotion and some of the advertising and things like that. But what is the true role of Canada Beef in the sector?
Well, first, I'd like to say that we have a great team, 28 people around the world. We have offices in Japan and Korea, Vietnam, China, Taiwan, Mexico, and an office as well in Toronto. Essentially, two sentences: create value. For whom? Our producer and the entire value chain of the beef industry. Our goal is to make beef the protein of choice. That's it. How do we do it? Consumer marketing, channel marketing, global marketing, intel, which we'll probably talk a little bit later on with our collaboration with CCA and Nathan. Research and development on nutrition, health, as well as the underutilized cuts to enhance the consumption. We have 300 cuts of beef. So what do? We're trying to optimize and increase value. Stakeholder communication, and drive growth.
Nice. It's an incredibly important role, and when we talk about the consumer, that consumer is not just that one person. It's not this singular individual that we're trying to market to. It is very complex, and it requires, like you mentioned, some of the research and the data and the information and multiple streams of marketing, not just in Canada, but also around the world, because this is a global product, and we are trying to get it, hopefully this railway strike doesn't take very long, but we're trying to get it to port and out around the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to bring in our other guest to this panel. We're going to bring in Nathan Phinney from the CCA. But first, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, brought to you by Canada Beef.
FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. Being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's hybrid fall rye varieties and their end uses, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your fall seed strategy specific to your region.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. and a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGly.ca.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School, brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. We are broadcasting from the Canadian Beef Industry Conference in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. The weather is beautiful outside. Farmers are getting out of the fields and trying to get some combining done across the province of Saskatchewan and quite frankly, Canada. And we'll definitely see where those crop yields shake out here as the harvest season progresses. But today we are talking about the cattle industry and beef. Very, very tasty subject indeed. We've been talking to Eric Bienvenue. He is the president of Canada Beef, and now we're bringing in to join us, it is Nathan Phinney, who is the president of the Canadian Cattle Association. Nathan, it's great to see you.
Morning, Shaun. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, last time we did an interview, you were haying. You were like on a tractor, and I was sitting in my comfy, cozy, air-conditioned studio, and this is nice to be able to do this in person.
Yeah, contrary to what some people believe, the rain does stop every so often in the Maritimes, where we do have the ability to put up a little bit of hay, but that's why we were in the tractor seat that day.
Nice stuff. Okay, let's get in. When this session was being introduced, we were going to talk about some of the collaboration between the two organizations, but also maybe a little bit get a better understanding, because I don't think it's super clear to everybody where the lanes of responsibility are for our two main organizations that are joining us here today on the show. So, Nathan, let's start with you. From your perspective, how do the two organizations, Canada Beef and CCA, how do you work together?
Yeah, we're very complementary, and I think one thing that we need to understand is both of our organizations are funded from producers' dollars. So we try to find maximum efficiencies working together and collaborating together. Now, in saying that, under some of these funds, there are certain lanes and restrictions that you can and can't do with it. We're the advocacy part, so there's a portion of the advocacy part that is completely separate from Canada Beef. That allows us at CCA to do our job, which is advocating policy, working with government, dealing with things like the rail strike we're dealing here with today. So on an international scale, that's where our lane is, and Eric, I'm sure, will explain where they're at.
Just to make sure it's clear for everybody, when you say advocacy, what, lobbying?
That's a dirtier word, but yes, that's what we do.
Networking.
Networking.
Okay, just making sure, because some people, when they hear advocacy, it may not be clear. So, Eric, from your standpoint, how do you see the collaboration?
Well, I'd like to first say that we're a team, right? We're working for the same goal. Our goal, as I explained, it's on the marketing side. And Nathan, I think, described it very well. We complement each other. There's no duplication of efforts here. We're trying to always optimize each team. Our goal, we focus on the beef and human health nutrition. We don't do any lobbying. We don't do any networking. And we stay in the human health nutrition space.
Okay.
So you got to think of Canada Beef as the plate side of the chain, and Nathan on the policy side, or CCA on the policy side.
Mm-hmm. And we were, the three of us were chatting yesterday. It's about effectiveness and being as productive as possible with producer dollars. Go ahead, Eric.
I go back to what I said, when we first started the show. We have one goal, and one goal only, is to create value for our producers and the entire beef industry chain. So that's what we're trying to do. And there's, again, I'm repeating myself, but there are no duplication of efforts. And our mandate is to market and grow our landscape, our sales landscape, not only here, but abroad.
Nathan, is there spots where you do overlap?
I think we stay very well in our lanes, but, to Eric's point, where we are very efficient on international trade, Eric finds the markets, knows the markets. We run into some non-tariff barriers at times, some regulations, some tariff rates, and that's our mandate. That's where we come in to try to tear those down and work on solving those issues so that we can open the doors for our product to move around. And, I think we'll get into it a little later, but diversification is key to the success of our industry and finding strong markets and building those relationships. So that's where CCA comes in and complements and works along Canada Beef on the international trade side of things, is a lot of this policy work and ensuring and influencing our Canadian government that it's a good trade deal for our producers.
Yeah, we'll get to some examples, some of the collaboration here in a second. But Nathan, you've been around CCA for a while. How has the collaboration between CCA and Canada Beef evolved over time, from your perspective?
We're representing the producers, and we have the world's best story to tell. We have the world's best producers in the world producing the best protein in the world. It's like everything. At times there's going to be, like a marriage, there's going to be ups and downs. And, one thing about it is our teams collaborate very well and work together. I have seen that. And I've seen it strengthening even more and more, through all the divisions, through all of the committees, staffs working well together. And we need to continue that. We've heard this throughout the conference this week. We're stronger together. And, we want to make sure that our producers' dollars are being effectively used, and we're maximizing every cent that we can, as we know it is a tough industry. And so I would say in my tenure here, it's been almost 10 years, I've seen great relationships, great synergy between the two groups, and I think it's only getting stronger.
So Eric, let's highlight some examples of some of the challenges that have been tackled from a collaboration standpoint between the two organizations. What are some examples that come to mind?
Probably two or three right off the bat.
Yep.
On our trade mission, we work very, very closely with CCA, with Nathan. We just came back from Korea, Nathan, Jennifer Babcock, and myself, and not only trying to promote and enhance ourselves, but as well relying on CCA regarding some trade tariffs. The other project that comes to mind is the front of pack, and that was quite a challenging project or challenge that Canada was facing, and thanks to CCA for their networking or working through the path, we were able, with our research and our analysis, think about the cooking side and draining, we were able to have beef exempt of that policy, and that's a great win out of all the grinds that exist in the market. And I would say as well, the national beef strategy, it's not a challenge, but it's a working group. And that's where you see the strength, as Nathan was mentioning, of all the parts that becomes one, in creating those several pillars to make our industry much bigger and better. And ourselves, well, we concentrate on the marketing and on the demand side. And all the other parts, and it's being managed in the next 2 years by CCA and Mr. Dennis Laycraft, but all the parts comes up to one big full effort to get our industry to a higher level. And like Nathan said, we have the best beef in the world.
Well, and I think the beef industry is a really good example where, at the 100,000-foot goal is to drive more demand and sell more product in Canada and beyond. But inside of the sector, there's going to be different interests at times because, you think about the purebred to the rancher to the cattle feeder, like just those three groups sometimes don't see eye to eye in a networking session in the hospitality suite. Then you got the packer and they got the grocer, the distributors. Like this is a very complex chain. And so being able to get all on the same page from a beef strategy perspective, I think, Nathan, is a great example.
Yeah, it is, and I think we're seeing of a reduction in our herd overall numbers, but the key part is all of those components that you just mentioned. We're still producing the same amount of beef as we were, when we had 1 million more head on and that's through great research, that's through great trade, that's through genetic work, that's through everything that this industry has to offer. And when we work together, there's nobody any more resilient than beef farmers and ranchers, and we'll find a way to get it done. And I think. One thing that we need to ensure that we've gone through some tough times, but as we travel with Eric and team and go to these trade missions, one thing we need to remind ourselves is we're finally in a position where our product is well under the supply over the demand in the world, and that is only growing. We are positioned for success. And I know Mother Nature plays a lot into that, and there's a lot of other regulations and issues, and that's where we come in and work on these. But I think we need to remind ourselves, all of the different players in this, whether it be the packing plants, whether it be the purebred guy, the feeder, we've struggled through at times, but we're in a pretty good position, and hopefully we can continue to grow this.
Yeah, and Eric, before we have a break here, from your perspective, how important is it for research that Canada Beef is doing to drive and support some of the advocacy efforts that CCA is taking care of? Where does the research fit into this? How does it help?
Well, research on the consumer side,
yes.
Right? Not on the production side. And I think CCA has always mentioned that the orientation is science-based and verified facts. And we're working to having always true facts. And once we provide that information, that intel to Nathan and the entire team, then it's much easier to present any cases to anybody and trying to alleviate or change the orientation of a original, orientation, a policy orientation. So our goal is to provide facts, to provide accurate, science-based, on the consumer side, information.
So, for example, some of those consumer facts, so that Nathan and Dennis and Jen can walk into Health Canada and meet with the minister and say, here's the data, here's what it's saying, and here's why we think this decision needs to be made the way that we believe it, it's in the best interest of the cattle industry, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And uniquely in this industry, where we are predominantly agriculture, we need to walk in all of those offices. We're in the transport office, we're in the health office, we're in the labor
Can you
office.
phone the transport minister and the labor minister today?
I'm sure that phone call will be coming very shortly. But, it really builds on the consumer confidence and what Eric says about having science and research to back everything up, because we rely on that when we go into those, and they're not really our portfolio, we're ag, but when we have to go into those, we need to be very well prepared on what we're going into saying. So on the nutrition side of things, when we're going in to talk to Health Canada, and we have a great team on both sides, but being provided that material to have, as Eric said, the scientific proof to back that up, it makes our job, and that's why we're effective, to stopping things like front of pack labeling.
Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to move the panel discussion to talk a little bit about trade. And we got a good collaboration example that with our friends to the south that I think it's important to highlight and talk about. You're listening to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Canada Beef. We're broadcasting from the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. We'll be right back right after this.
Apply anhydrous ammonia and protect your application earlier than normal this fall. Defend against potential losses and protect your bottom line with Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Patented active ingredient Pronitridine offers agronomically effective protection where it matters most, below ground. Easy to handle Centuro is also non-corrosive for fewer worries about downtime or equipment damage. Start early with Centuro as part of your nitrogen management plan. Contact your local retailer or visit centuro.ca for more information today. Doing more in the field is possible when you add the proven power of Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, the next generation dual-active urease inhibitor from Koch Agronomic Services. Driven by Duramide technology, Anvil gives growers the advantages of low application rate and long-lasting protection, all thanks to Duramide, a Koch-patented active ingredient. Defend against volatilization. Boost efficiency. Accomplish more. Learn all about the dual-active power of Anvil by visiting anvil.ca. That's ANVOL.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, broadcasting this Thursday from the Canadian Beef Industry Conference in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Today's show is brought to you by Canada Beef. We've heard a little bit about some of the goals and the priorities of Canada Beef. You can find out more and check out that cool marketing campaign, Pick the Beef with the Leaf, by going to CanadaBeef.ca. And of course, tomorrow on the show, we're going to be doing our Real Ag Issues panel. And Kelvin Hepner, Lindsay Smith will be joining me from RealAgriculture, as well as Tyler McCann from CAPI. And I promise you, hopefully, well, I know we're going to talk about the rail strike. Hopefully we're talking about the fact that we see some sort of light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, when it comes to that, because it's really going to impact the Canadian economy, this sector, beef, as well as many others. So you can find out more by going to RealAgriculture.com and stay up to date on all of the minute-by-minute what's happening there with that strike. We're joined here on the stage with Eric Bienvenue. He is the president of Canada Beef, as well as Nathan Phinney, who is the president of CCA. So, Nathan, yesterday we had a trilateral meeting, trade critical. You know, Eric and his team are promoting Canadian beef across the world, and one of our biggest markets is the U.S. Trade had to have come up at the trilateral meeting yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a country that is the size of the U.S. as your biggest trading partner, that accounts for about 80% of your marketing and exports, that comes up quite frequently in trilateral meetings. You know, and it's no secret, a lot of what was coming up, and Mexico just had their election, and we're all on edge watching what's going to happen in the U.S. election. We've often heard up here of, you know, what each party is bringing to the table and what they're suggesting, and you know, so it's our job to go down there and make sure that we continue to build the relationships with the policymakers and with different states. But you know, we need to ensure as a country that that trade remains strong. Now, in saying that, there often is a risk at times of putting too many eggs in one basket, and that's where we're looking at some of these other great markets like Japan, like South Korea, so that we, if there ever is an issue, we have other options to continue to move our product. And for an example, Shaun, you know, you look when China shut the door a couple of years on us, our industry didn't really see a ripple in it because we had great trading deals signed up and great trading partners, so we diverted it. But our ultimate goal, and I would say it's our friends from the U.S. and Mexico were up, and it's top of mind for everybody to make sure that that trade between the U.S. and Canada and North America stays strong.
Well, I don't think there's another commodity in the Canadian commodity complex that knows more about the impacts of when you can't move product to your biggest trading partner, and of course the BSE hangover. We know it very, very well. I believe it still haunts us today from a mindset in many different areas. We will never forget that chain of events. And before we move on to talking about some of the Product to USA stuff, how concerned should the people in this room and ranchers and feed yard owners listening, how concerned should they be about USMCA and this July 1st, 2026 date where there potentially is a review? Well, there is going to be a review, but not necessarily a renegotiation, but at least a relook. How concerning is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an understanding that we need to be concerned and we're watching. But, you know, day one, they can't take the deal and tear it up. There are parameters around that to protect the current trade deal. So, we're not in fear of the day that it happens, that if and when something changes, that they're going to completely scrap it immediately. But again, I can't reiterate it enough. When 80% of your trade is done with one country, everybody needs to be concerned and make sure that they're doing everything that they can do to hold up and make sure that deal doesn't fall apart. I mean, we have one party talking about a potential tariff of 10%, or maybe even 20 sounds better. That'd be catastrophic. And, we're working and doing everything we can, and we've encouraged all of our partners in the country and provinces to make every effort in the next year and a half to make sure you get to the States to continue to strengthen those relationships that we've already built on.
Yeah, well put. Eric, one of the examples from a trade perspective, and Canada Beef did a lot of work, research in this area, is the Product of USA label. Of course, another issue that this group knows very well, mandatory country of origin labeling. The Product of USA label is voluntary. From Canada Beef's perspective and your research in this area, what is going to be the impact of this Product of USA label on Canadian beef exports?
As long as it remains voluntary, our understanding and information from our partners is that it should be okay, as long as it remains voluntary. If and when it becomes mandatory, then we're going to have to take probably action as Canada Beef, probably on the policy side. But we're going to have to be present. We're going to have to make sure that our pick the beef with the leaf, that our leaf is a badge of honor, that it doesn't become a discounted product. But as of today, what we have for all the information that we've gathered is that there shouldn't be any major impact.
And there's also probably there's voluntary, there's mandatory, but then there's also like this in between where it's voluntary, but it's really kind of mandatory because you're kind of forced to go that direction. And I think that's one of the big concerns that Canada has, right, Nathan?
Yeah, and I think the difficult part is we don't know what we don't know. And, the regulation for this comes into effect January 1, 2026. So, as much as we can continue to hypothetically think of what may happen, could happen, potential outcomes, how this may go away, may be adopted, again, we don't know what we don't know. We are positioned, though, and we are going to continue to monitor if there is any discrepancy or segregation that happens to any of Canadian products. We do have the ability to challenge, and we had a ruling that WTO said we were right. And, we've made that well known in the U.S. as the last thing that we ever want to get into is a trade war with the Americans or flash that card. But it is there, and we're here to protect the Canadian industry, and we will do anything that we need to do to ensure that market stays open and we have fair and open trade.
We're talking about a very restrictive label, correct? Like, compared to others in the world, we're talking about the way this has gone is an incredibly restrictive labeling requirement.
Yeah, and that was the argument that we used. My colleagues, we spent a fair bit of time in Washington and talked to USDA and talked to the U.S. Trade Administration, and what we said is coming out of droughts and coming out of certain areas in crisis, and we had our critical infrastructure where it's spread over North America we're unique that North America, we have the world's largest integrated beef trading system on live cattle. And we need to do things to strengthen that because we complement each other. It's as good for them as it is for us, and we realize that. So when we said you're putting prescriptive labels on things that are really taking away from that ability to harmonize or to really integrate, I think our concerns were heard, but again, it's one of those political pushes that I think the mind was already made up. But we need to continue to monitor this and work with them.
Yeah, and it's a good example where trying to fix an issue, and this whole thing started because I think it was out of Uruguay. There was some product coming out of Uruguay into the United States. It was in a box. It was being put into a different box, and you could stamp Products USA label on it. Yeah, they should fix that. That seems like something that shouldn't be happening, but the problem is the policy review, this had some real scope creep to it, and now it's brought in a whole bunch of partners like Canada that really wasn't a part of the original scope review. So, Eric, from your perspective, what role does, like Nathan mentioned, both organizations down in Washington having different conversations with people in the U.S. about this. What role does research play in trying to move the needle to assist the Canadian industry on this topic?
Well, we do research, consumer research. What would be...
what would be an example of that? Like what?
Well, what's the impact? What's the perception that consumer would have in seeing or in changing the labeling? And would it affect their purchasing behavior? And that, I think, will not only give us, as Canada Beef, but for our industry, an analysis to adjust our actions. So that's what we're trying to do with CCA. We're providing and as well giving the information of the impact if the consumption and or volume of product to be sold will be impacted. And obviously what we're trying to do, and I said it at the beginning, is to create value, right? We're trying to create value. And the goal is not to have a product that is discounted because of that policy. So
is it, so you mentioned consumer research, but is it also like, I'll say downstream research, like so it's the impact and the decision making of grocers in terms of how they react to this labeling relative to Canadian product. Is it working itself through the chain too, or is it
correct?
Just
it's the entire chain.
Yeah.
And we try to provide, like I said, to provide as much information to Nathan and the team so that we have arguments and minimizing any potential risk and or alleviate any loss that we could have.
So Nathan, where is before we take a break here? Where is this topic? What's? I think it's sort of fallen out of the news a little bit. Where are we at with Product of USA label?
Yeah, well, it was announced back in, I think it was early spring that they were moving ahead with it, and our Mexican counterpart CNOG, we've collaborated. It affects them as well.
Absolutely.
And back to your point about Uruguay, it's an unintended consequence and collateral damage as far as we can see. It was never intended, to affect us, and so we're continuing to work. I mean, NCBA was up here this week, and it was brought up again in the trilateral, and we mentioned it a few times. They're watching it as well, and I will say that we do have a mutual respect, even though we are trading partners and competitors in a global market. We are friends, and they're giving us the right intel of when they see an issue and when we need to be down there even more. And I will say also, from them we heard our embassy down there is saying everything, and that was quite comforting coming out of our trilateral. That when they said when there's an issue down here like voluntary product of the U.S., your ambassador is being very loud, and we hear him.
Well, and I think one of the things too is, I mentioned the rail strike earlier. That's a great example of, we're not even 24 hours into that strike, and honestly, my phone was blowing up this morning from U.S. media in the ag space, wondering, what is exactly going on, because they want to hear about it because they see it impacting them. I think it's a great example of how integrated not only the beef value chain is, but just our two economies in general. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dig into some of the details on the front of package labeling for beef. I think it's a great case study in the two organizations working very, very closely together. Can you imagine the Canadian government was going to put a warning label on ground beef as if they were cigarettes? We'll get to that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School. Brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. We're having a great time here today at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. We are joined by Nathan Phinney of CCA, as well as Eric Bienvenue. He is the president of Canada Beef, and today's show is brought to you by Canada Beef. You can find out more by going to canadabeef.ca. And of course, as we've been hearing from Eric, Canada Beef provides domestic and international market development and promotion services to the Canadian beef industry to increase demand for Canadian beef while ensuring maximum value for producer dollars. And that's been a big part of today's discussion, maximizing that producer dollar. Very, very important, and it all happens because of producers. Okay, so we've been talking about some of the collaboration between CCA and Canada Beef, and connecting it to some of the issues of the day. You know, one of the issues, guys, that personally I scratched my head about how we got to that point, and I have a whole bunch of personal editorial feelings that maybe I will or won't share today on the stage regarding this topic. But front of package labeling of beef. This is where we were moving down a road, and pork was brought into this too, Eric, as you know, where ground pork and ground beef were potentially going to have a warning label on the front of package. And a lot of work went into trying to help the government find an exit ramp. There's my personal opinion. Trying to find an exit ramp to maybe change course on the idea, of course, which they did. So this is an example of a win for these two organizations. So, Eric, how did CCA and Canada Beef, how did you successfully work towards, or CCA did, they were advocating, you were providing research. How did you work against the implementation of this potential policy?
Well, first we did some research. We gathered all the information regarding the purchasing element with all the Nielsen data. We did what we call draining research. So you're cooking your grind beef, and you're draining what is called the unsaturated fat.
Right.
And trying to gather as much information, and as well, we reviewed the cooking practices, and we work with Heart and Stroke Foundation and right. Finding more elements. And I believe we analyzed the matrix, the nutritional table, so that we could have all the information and having enough so that CCA and the group could work with our governmental official and have our beef exempt from that regulation.
Yeah, this is a good example because a lot of times when we talk about the cattle industry, we talk about it, how this potential issue or policy impacts producers. And you talk in a certain language and certain terminology, but this is an example where this was coming out of Health Canada. So we've got to come at it from a nutritional angle, right? Because it's not about, well, it means our cow herds, it's gonna hurt demand, and we're gonna have less producers. Yeah, Health Canada doesn't care about that, right? We're talking about nutrition, and this is where that data is so important. Now, Nathan, so you have that info. Then you're busting down doors and pounding fists, or what was your role in this?
You're not the only one that was scratching your head, and I'm still scratching my head to how we got to where we were. But, I think it showed us one thing that I think we can take out of this. And every bad situation, you come out of it with a positive. And one thing our consumers told us and told the government very loudly is, don't mess with our beef. Don't tell us what we need to consume. And that was for us a very, very proud and humbling moment that, you know, like other situations, our consumers stood up for us. You know, we've been in situations, you mentioned one in the early 2000s, you know, we ate our way out of it, a bad situation. Our consumers were there, and they were there for us again. You know, and the other positive that came out of that is we really pride ourselves and hold ourselves at a very high regard of how we advocate or network or lobby. And very seldom we do it very effectively, and we get a lot of respect the way we do it. And we don't come out loud very often. But when we do, they knew that there was a major issue. And I think, you know, going forward, as you know, we navigate the political landscape, as much as that was an issue, I think it gained us a lot of recognition that the beef industry is strong. They're a strong voice within this country, but the consumers are also backing them. So they definitely helped us kick some doors down as much as our producers and our team did.
Now, Eric, in this example where we're doing the draining research, as you described, I'm trying to imagine that experiment and what that looks like. But that kind of research isn't just being done when there's an issue, right? Like there's this kind of research being done on a continual basis all the time in preparation in case of issues like this coming up. Am I correct in that, making that assumption?
You're absolutely right. I think as you know, our organization is proactive. We're trying to have that flair, understanding what's happening in our markets, not only here domestically, but abroad with all our team. And we consistently look at the trends, industry insights. We work very closely with all our packers, with CCA, with our retailers, our importers, our food service, abroad as well. And we're part of the IMS, which gives us a lot of intel. With all this, then we're trying to, with our consumer research, we're trying to find the best route or the best path to always be first at the plate to mitigate and having all the information for Nathan and his team if any possible issues could arise.
Curious, obviously it's in the protein complex, it's very competitive for that consumer dollar between beef, pork, and poultry, for example. Hopefully not insects. Anyway, is there collaboration though? Because what we also want is we want the overall protein pie to expand, right? And people are consuming more protein. Is there collaboration from a research perspective on like amongst pork, poultry, and beef when it comes to just the benefit of more protein in the diet, like stuff like that? Is that kind of stuff being done, or we're not to that stage from a collaboration standpoint?
Well, I can't talk about the past, but in my 6 months at the helm, we've concentrated our efforts to beef. Do we work with different stakeholders? Yes, the Canadian Meat Council. Do we have communication with all the other organizations? For sure. And if there's a way that we can work together, then we'll try. But you know, I don't want to be egocentric, but my priority is beef.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. So when you look at this fronted package labeling example, what do you see? What are some of the long-term impacts that we can see or anticipate from this labeling debate on consumer perception of beef? Like, what did we learn from this? And Nathan, you mentioned the consumer stepped up big time, but did we learn? Was there other learnings from it? Like that was their action, but do we learn something from the consumer in terms of how they interact with beef as a protein source?
Yeah, and I think, you know, one thing that we did learn and we haven't touched on, and we know it's you talked about price comparison and affordability, But when we got into that complex conversation on doing that potentially and warning the consumer that there was something wrong with this product when there absolutely was nothing wrong with it, it's probably one of the most affordable cuts. And at that time, we were coming out of a COVID. There was a and we're still into that. There's an affordability crisis going on here, and we said you're going to put a warning label or potentially take away the ability for the people that need to buy healthy, nutritious food. So I think that's one thing that we listen to our consumers, and I think they were really pushing on that aspect of it. But it was a side that we were able to hammer home on the government too, is now you're not only dictating what people are eating, but you're taking away what they can afford to eat as well. So it was an angle that we were able to work, and I think we learned a little bit on how there's many sides to a story, and we need teams like Canada Beef to help pull us all together so that we can go in there and be effective and come at it with multiple arguments as opposed to a single one.
Yeah, and Eric, another example of where putting research to work is the National School Food Program and the benefits of beef being an important staple in our schools with our kids. There's another example of where that kind of research, how do moms and dads, how do they view beef relative to making sure their kids have it in school, stuff like that. Also another perfect example.
It is. Beef is naturally nutrient rich. And on the school side of it, not only, I guess, does it fit, it's essential for our children. Based on our research, we know that about 30% of all women in Canada are deficient in iron, and children as well, very close to that number. So it is important for our organization and for the entire industry to always promote and enhance the awareness of the great attributes of our beef. That is zinc, iron, and protein. And ultimately we want our children to be healthy, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to create indirectly by being always present and messaging, having that message regarding the nutrient aspect to probably increase loyalty right from the start with good nutrient beef meat. And it's increasing sales too, indirectly. And as well, it's a form of sustainability for our industry. So yes, it is crucial. And we are working very diligently with all the organization, the school organization, and trying to enhance our message regarding beef.
Well, if you listen to the show often, one of my perspectives is that we need to be more vocal in Canada in terms of what producer checkoff dollars are being used for and where they are going and the benefits that they're providing the industry. And I think today's session has been a great example of showing the benefits and the productivity of those producer dollars. Really want to thank Canada Beef for having us today here at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference and being the show sponsor. Eric, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shaun.
That's good. And Nathan Phinney, it was great to have you on the show here again, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks a lot, Shaun.
Okay, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, or you're also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Get flexible farm financing with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Save on interest costs and sell when the time and price are best for you. Visit ccga.ca to learn more. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advanced Payments Program.